Hello and welcome to a super special episode of the Stacey West Podcast. Today I am joined by a Lincoln City legend, not one that you've ever seen put the ball in the back of the net, but if it wasn't for him, you probably wouldn't be seeing anybody put the ball in the back of the net. He's Red Imps Community Trust Chairman and former club chairman, Rob Bradley. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to see you, Gary, and thank you for doing this. That's great. Be nice to put some words across. Fantastic.
Absolute pleasure. Now, for those of you looking at home, this may look strange, but Rob and I are actually sat just across from each other. There's my hand. But it does look like we're in different rooms. So, we will do our best. Now, Rob, first of all, could you just give people a little bit of a background, because there'll be some fans who are 20 years old, that sort of thing, who have seen you in the pod, but may not know your full Lincoln City background coming up to being chairman.
Well, briefly, I mean, I've always been a Lincolnshire person, sort of lived Skegness area till I was an adult and lived in Lincoln ever since. Always been a mad Lincoln City fan. Always been the sort of fan that wasn't interested in the chairman, the board, the behind the scenes, nothing. It was just the red and white stripes and what happened on the pitch. But around the time we were in the third tier with Man City and Fulham, that really good season, the sudden disappointment that we were struggling financially spurred me on a little bit to get a bit more involved behind the scenes. So I was doing a fanzine at the time. I'd sort of started doing that as a little hobby, sort of writing hobby. It was supposed to be like a football private eye, but it was far from that. It was rubbish, to be honest. But anyway, did that, raised a bit of money. But then there was a public meeting and a group of us started talking to John Reams about setting up a fans organisation, getting a fan on the board. And I got more and more involved in that. So I went from very quiet, just a fan, turn up at 5 to 3, go home at the end or before the end if it was rubbish, not really. And then got a lot more involved. And that's when the trust was set up, chaired the trust, got elected to the board as a fans representative, which, to be fair, was John Reams' idea at the time. It wasn't the fans' idea. He was quite progressive in that, in having fan involvement, that and the 25 grand we were going to raise to enable us to do that. So I went from really mad keen supporter to still a mad keen supporter, but more interested in what went on behind the scenes and the challenges that face a small club like Lincoln. So that was the basis of it, really.
Brilliant. Now, you mentioned the fanzine there, and you said that it was rubbish. Now, I'm going to argue the case that it wasn't, because I've got every copy with the collections of my fanzine. I believe it was called the Yellow Belly.
Yeah, that's it.
And I also believe that you once wrote to a Premier League footballer to ask him about diving in a game against Lincoln. Yeah,
we had a feature called The Letter where we wrote to somebody. I think there's Henry Root used to do diaries, if ever, people won't have heard of it. Quite an obscure thing, but he used to write innocently to people like the Prime Minister, MPs, celebrities. And sometimes they'd write back and then he'd publish all these letters. And they were quite funny because they thought he was genuine with what he was asking. And he cunningly took the mickey out of them. Well, we wrote to Egil Ostenstad, the Southampton player. We'd been to Southampton, I think it was a 2-2 draw, fantastic night. The Gareth Ainsworth era and that sort of thing. And a very deserved replay at Sinsel Bank. And Ostenstad, we all thought, dived to win a penalty because Lincoln were doing well in that game, shall we say. I can't remember how the scoring went. Anyway, it looked like he dived. It did to everybody. Penalty awarded, which we couldn't believe. So we wrote to him and said, thanks for diving. You know, are you going to answer us and say, why would you do such thing against a smaller club, blah, blah, blah. And just thought we'll publish the letter. It's a bit of relief or a bit of satisfaction that we've given him a bit of stick. Anyway, he sent the letter back, but he wrote on it and he said, I'm really sorry you thought I dived. I did not dive. I would not cheat, blah, blah, blah. And so we published the letter, but again, because we'd published it when we sent it, and then the reply with his scrawl written all over it. But fair dues, he did reply, because we tried it with other people taking the mickey and trying to get an answer. Nobody else ever replied, I don't think. So Egil Ostenstad got a bit more respect back, but still bitter about the penalty.
Yeah, because it was definitely a dive.
It was a dive. Yeah, absolutely.
Gordon Watson scored it. I think we were 1-0 up, and I think that equalled it. And then they went and scored 2 in the last 10 minutes or something.
It turned the corner, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it turned the corner for them, and they didn't look like scoring until they got that opportunity. So yeah. So anyway, it was a bit of fun. We tried some Mickey takes in the fanzine. We had a poetry corner and all this sort of stuff, and it was good fun doing it. To be honest, the front cover, it was black and white, but the front cover had got a fat Lincoln City player holding his belly up, and every issue we had to use a yellow marker pen to colour his belly yellow. So we would have like 250 printed, and there's me and a couple of mates. Give me that's it. Colouring in this fat bloke's belly. Anyway, too much information, but there you go. It's good fun doing it. I enjoyed it.
Have you got any copies of it on the Red Imps Community Trust Museum?
I've got them personally.
Yeah.
They might be on. I'll have to ask Steve Feaston if they're on the museum. I think the fronts are. There's 6 altogether, I think. I've got them in a folder somewhere. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing it, to be honest. And used to sell them at away games. This is the point, really. Selling them at away games, which then created quite a lot of conversation, quite a lot of fans' views that you never thought you'd hear. This was the thing about carrying the fans' voice. It was a good vehicle for that, apart from the fun of doing this fanzine. That's what got me more involved, if anything, was hearing what fans thought and some quite surprising views. Fans are very knowledgeable as well about their club, and this is the whole point of putting across what fans think about what's given to them, what the offer is at a match, where clubs get it wrong, that type of thing. So it's good for that. You'd like to stand outside Mansfield and Darlington and whatnot selling this, and you'd be having a conversation, for a good long time, right up until kickoff. So that was the most enjoyable bit about it, to be honest.
So like a modern day social media.
Yeah. But it was face to face, so not quite as drastic as it is on social
Some people
media.
weren't quite as brave as they are behind the keyboards.
They rarely are.
You mentioned Mansfield there. If my memory serves me correct, that was the final game of John Reams's reign as chairman. We went on 3-2. I don't know if you took over after that, but kind of how did that come about? What were the circumstances leading up to it? And let's play a little bit on the role John Reams played, because I think history has changed people's perception of him from the time, because he was very much a villain at the time, and he's very much now held as quite a progressive chairman. Yeah.
Well, John Reams' manner often influenced people in what they thought about him, because he was quite bumptious. He's got quite a temper on him. Lonsdale, the chief exec, looking across at me, smiling, thinking, this is John's manner. And everybody knew it. And I tell you what, I really liked the guy. I liked him because he was passionate about Lincoln City. Sometimes he got things wrong about what people said or what they did, and he used to fly off the handle. When we set the trust up, there was 1 or 2 people who would fall out with him, and they would bear the grudge. They wouldn't want to be involved in the trust anymore. And really, for the trust to succeed, you had to sort of take it on the chin a bit and then move on to the next subject. Because the next time he'd say, he's stopping for a beer, Rob, or this type of thing, and I'm thinking, you've just fallen out with me. It was just his manner. And when you look back at his record, he did a hell of a lot of good things for the football club, not least its redevelopment. And I know perhaps some of the ground might be a little bit tired now and needs some work, but it's an all-seater stadium because of what John Reams did. Do you know what I mean? And we could have been in a lot worse situation, the infrastructure, let alone anything else. So, yeah, I got on okay with John. I think he respected me because I was a passionate fan, and vice versa, basically. So it was quite a good chemistry, even though there was a few rows, but there you go. I forgot what the question was.
But just then the circumstances of you taking over his kind of departure.
Yeah, well, he wanted to go. He felt he was holding the club back, but I think he wanted to go anyway. I think he wanted to just support the club. And he made this offer of his 800,000 shares. Somebody would get them and therefore pretty much control the club if they invested the equivalent value into the football club, £400,000. But then they'd have to fund the football club and run it. And so his big preference was Norton Lee. I don't know if this is a long time ago. He had been chairman at Chesterfield. I was on the board. We'd got quite an active trust, and we thought, why is somebody who's not a fan of Lincoln City coming in, even if he's got a few quid, basically? So we tried to build up an option, a local option, which was a real struggle. And I kept putting stuff to John, as in, we've got another 50 grand, as in an investor will come in, put that money in, the shares will go to the trust, blah, blah, blah. We got Lincolnshire Cooperative involved. Keith Darwin was then the chief exec. He said, yeah, we'll fund it because we really like the idea of broad ownership. Local business people and the supporters are quite a nice balance of the two. It's local, it's a collective, it's accountable, it's a transparent, that type of thing. But John was sold on Norton Lee taking over the club until Norton eventually struggled and then sort of said he couldn't do it because he couldn't get his money out of Chesterfield. He, you know, the saga of people at Chesterfield, and it all went downhill there. Well, I think that's the start of that process. And whatever he got in loans, the classic chairman putting in loans at a football club and wants it back when it's the worst possible time. He couldn't get his money out. And then I remember the phone call. I remember it vividly, to be honest. John Reams rang me up and said, Rob, what's this community ownership thing you've been trying to put together? And I thought, well, I have been telling you about it, but you haven't been listening, have you? Because you're not interested. He said, well, what is it all about? So we had a good half an hour, and I thought, I knew then, he's like, number one, his preferred option isn't working. And number two, he's looking now, can this be made to work? And then our position got stronger and stronger, especially as we could then convey to people who are interested that the current chairman is now looking at it, and it created quite a lot of interest. So then ultimately we did the deal. Doing the deal itself was very precarious. On the day of the press conference, people waiting outside in the exec club while we were in the boardroom, the goalposts were moving left and right and backwards and forwards, and the heads of terms was still not signed while the press were waiting half an hour after the thing was due to start. And this isn't a criticism of John Reams, this is just how these things go. But then eventually the phone call came, we all signed, and then we went through and told them that we'd got community ownership of the football club. It was community, including local business people, the Keith Rose, the Step Wrights, people like that. But the trust gained 800,000 shares, which was a significant amount then. It was way over the sort of 25% margin. It's like nothing now. The shareholding we've got is nothing in percentage terms because of the holding company and the investment that's been made. But it meant a trust had got a controlling interest in a football club, which is of great interest to other trusts and clubs up and down the country, really. So, yeah. Long answer, sorry.
It's absolutely fine. I remember it being groundbreaking, but I don't think there was anything groundbreaking about Lincoln City's infrastructure when you first came in. Yes, John Reams has got the nice ground, but it was a tough time for football, wasn't it? What was it like as you came in? Kind of the size of the task that faced you.
Well, it was always written out and publicly that the collapse of ITB Digital caused us then, after about a season of ticking over, the ITB Digital collapse was the thing that started the downward trend. We didn't come in and then there was a struggle. We came in and then there was a very poor season on the pitch, very poor commercial activity because we were like fifth from bottom, and we never looked like doing any good. I mean, bless him, Alan Buckley, beautiful football, but we never scored goals and we let in loads. So, you know what I mean? It's not really what you want. But the ITB Digital thing was the straw that broke the camel's back, because the finances, that 400 grand went particularly nowhere. It was like helpful, but we really needed a good season. We needed good commercial activities. And there were other issues that cropped up, which I'm not going to go into here because it's difficult for that not to find its way in some sort of blame to one person or another. But as more stuff emerged, the situation at the club got very dire, very dire. Yeah, I suppose that's no exaggeration. But otherwise, we wouldn't have brought in the insolvency people, and that's when that process started, really.
So that kind of brings us up to the summer of 2002, which it was make or break. I was doing some research earlier. There was a news story where the day went into administration. You were delighted because 7 days prior, it did look like the club wasn't going to even be around. What did that look like for you that summer, kind of being lifelong Lincoln City fan and being right on the precipice of whether we continue to exist or not?
Well, it was, there were greater minds than mine that were orchestrating how things went on, both, this is legal and financial stuff. And the legal is a minefield to go into administration. If anybody thinks a club just goes into administration to clear debt, and to pay preferred creditors and wash the hands of other creditors, because there's no great pride in doing that. There were people who didn't get paid, basically, local people who should have got paid. So we've got a team of people, and we've got insolvency practitioners. Mike Ellingworth, a lovely guy, completely eccentric guy, but he knew what he was doing. And it was a real struggle. And the worst time of all, in my book I've just brought out, it describes it, was a Friday night when some new investors were coming in. So we held high hopes that they would come in, take over, or work alongside us. And Mike Ellingworth was coming that day as well to say what our case would be in the High Court the following week. Mike Ellingworth turned up and put a letter in front of us all, each individually titled to each of us all, I can't support you. You've got no case to answer in the High Court. We would be thrown to the wolves, basically. Bearing in mind, this was Friday afternoon and we were going in the High Court in Birmingham on the Monday, me representing the club. Though the investors suddenly became even more important. And I remember now, like I'm sat at the head of this table, one of them was sat at the far end of the other end of the table. I was looking, he's got some, it's in the book, he's got some gunk on his head to sort of disguise the fact that he was bald. He was like some tar. I couldn't take my eyes off it, despite the pressure of the time, thinking, why have you got that stuff on your head? It was ridiculous. These two guys were Russell and Lewis, who ended up at Exeter. One of them ended up in prison. One of them ended up, God knows how many hours community service. They had nothing to offer. They turned up with blank sheets of paper, not a plan. They were just, we're going to do lots of commercial stuff. They were a waste of time. So we sent them on their way, and the pessimism plummeted another 90 degrees when we heard that news. And late into the night, as directors went, saying, it's not good, we've got a problem. Myself and Keith Rowe were there. It was emotional, it was distraught, it was what we're going to do. But then some little miracles started to happen over that weekend. People started to make commitments. The PFA came back to us, who kicked us into touch. They came in with some sort of relief on the players' contracts, soft loan. We went to see them and they said, you gave out the contracts. We're not going to tell our players to accept less. We didn't actually give out the contracts. We'd inherited most of them. But things started to get put into place, but not to the point that the appearance in court on the Monday was anything other than a really difficult one. I could talk for hours about that, but just this little magical expression, which to the day I die, I will never forget. After a lot of debate, a barrister who put our case like I've never heard, such a mind that bloke had got. The judge eventually, when it was time to give a ruling, the magical words were, Lincoln City, like a lot of little clubs, hangs to life by a thread. I am not going to be the person who cuts that thread. So we've got a lifeline, talking about rope and threads and God knows what. We've got a lifeline. It wasn't solved, but it gave us a bit longer. Long story short, things started to come together more. And the next time we were in the High Court, admin was granted. But still a really difficult process. But a particular hurdle that we never looked like getting over, it had been, we'd got over that. So it was a stressful time, and I felt out of control. I'm a simple guy. I was doing the PR. Greater minds than mine were doing all this. I was having to interpret it, get the messages across. I was having to contact people. You know, when you're the chairman, you'd sort of put the message across, whether you understand it or whether you agree with it. You're the spokesperson, really. I think there was some advantage in having a fan as the chairman, because people had some sympathy with that. But also another thing that somebody said to me at the time, when we had to let somebody go, a prominent member of staff, he said, you know, when the club goes under, it's your name over the door, not anybody else's, not the manager or the directors. So I said, thanks for that. And to be honest, I could see why he said it, because he just lost his job, having given up a career to come back to Lincoln City. And I thought, yeah, that is right. I would have had to leave the area. I could not have lived in Lincoln if we'd been thrown to the wolves and it had gone out the league and took over by people with the wrong intentions. I would not have lived in Lincoln. I'd have said to Polly and the kids, I couldn't walk down the street if it had failed, whether or not it was my fault or not. And you could say the year after we took over, this was happening. You could say it was my fault. We should have looked into it more. We should have got the thing sorted. We did get it sorted, but it was brinkmanship, to say the least. So a difficult time.
It's summer of 2002. The club has been saved. You're looking forward. Got paying staff of probably 5 or 6, something like that.
There was a few more. There was some we kept on because they were cheap. Otherwise, there would have been 5 or 6. But we'd got like 12 or 13, and it was the Keith Act then came into being, where he got players in on peanuts. You know what I mean? But anyway, yeah.
So that's what I'm going to look at. It's now you're not saving the club. Now it's about recruitment, and now it's about putting bodies in the ground. Obviously, I'm not in the ground. You know what I mean? In the building, my lord. Yeah. There's no buried bodies at Sinsel Bank.
Absolutely.
So obviously, the likes of Justin Walker have gone. The likes of I think Grant Brown left that summer.
Yeah,
So you've got Paul Morgan, you've got Peter Gaines, the Stuart Vincents. But what does recruitment look like? Because we know now that there's Jez at the head of a recruitment team, and they're scouting and they're watching videos, and there's 8 or 9 people, and there's big long lists.
Yeah.
What was it like? Was it Keith coming to you saying, I've seen this lad playing for Hyde, and was it that simple?
Yeah, it was Keith and Gary, because Gary was responsible for some of the signings just as much as Keith were. They'd got, like, whether it was written down or it was all in their minds, they'd got a list of players they knew could do a job. And Keith's first experience at Lincoln was young players trying to play football, and he got the sack. And then he'd had some years in non-league, and Keith realised he'd been with most of his clubs he'd been with, hadn't got any money. And so Keith's philosophy from getting the sack, trying to play football when he was promised he wouldn't get the sack, just bring on the youngsters and everything else, and in the end they got rid of him, it was, I need to get results from day one. And how we do it, I don't care. And it'll be a more basic system, because I can't afford players who can play really good football. So they'd spent, I think they just loved doing it. So they went round, they'd spent all the time we were in the boardroom and lawyers' offices and the courtroom, they were looking at players, because we recruited Keith as manager, because we had to have a manager. So he came to us and we said, so I've got this lad, Simon Yeo, I've got this lad, Dean Cropper, people like that, Ben Futcher, they're all non-league. And we were like, it's up to you, Keith. We can't judge that. But how much are they going to cost? And they were 300 quid a week, 350 a week, 400 quid a week. They were giving up jobs to play league football and costing them money, because they were earning more playing part-time and working, but they wanted to play league football. And recruitment really was Keith, Gary Simpson, and Keith Rowe, who was a master at the contractual side of it. That was recruitment, and that's not to say that's how it should be, because it was like a lot of hard work and not a lot of money to spend. And really, we just trusted the manager and his assistant. So there wasn't a director of football, but that's not to say you don't do that. It's just a different way of doing things now. The way the football club do it now, and I have experience being on the board then, 20 years ago, and I had 4 years up until a year or two ago. That's what my book's about, the contrast of how Lincoln City was then and how it is now, and how fantastic it is now. How it's done now is the proper way of doing it. But how it was done then was how it had to be done at the time. And Keith and Gary, they knew how to get results on a shoestring squad. Otherwise, we would have been back struggling. There was loans we had to pay off. There was financial things we had to commit to. But Keith, to get us in the playoffs like he did, Keith and Gary, that was as much of a miracle and saving the club as whatever anybody else did in that summer leading up to administration and coming out of administration, because the gates went up a bit. The commercial people started to respond. They liked to see Lincoln winning at home. They weren't bothered the ball was in the air and everything else like that. There was the buzz of recovery, coupled with the buzz of the sort of playoff years. And Keith led that. Bless him, he led that. He was as much sorted us out on the business side as he did on the playing side. So
yeah, just in the boardroom that summer, so you've got these names coming in that we all know them now. We know the Simon Yaos and the Simon Weavers, and obviously they've gone on to be brilliant football careers. Simon Weaver, longest football professional manager.
Yeah.
In the boardroom, was there a fear on that first game? And it was away at Kidderminster, I think.
Yeah.
I think we scored late. Richard Logan, I think, was sent off, wasn't he?
Richard
was Dean Cropper
sent off. Richard Logan scored. He scored. We conceded a penalty, I think. But it's 1-1 anyway.
I have a photo of you actually in the Kidderminster boardroom
from
Bob, so I'll use that as part of the promo. But was there a fear kicking off that game? Was it just if we finished 23rd? I think because I think it was only one relegate. Oh, it might have been two at the time. Yeah,
that was when they brought two in. So it was double the bloody threat. You know what I mean?
Was success simply 22nd?
I'll tell you what it was. We didn't even know what it was. Because right up until the season started, we had no idea what we were going to do football-wise. Every single ounce of energy was concentrated on getting the club so we could play in that football season. Because you have to make certain commitments to the Football League. You have to have your season ticket money to spend during the season. We could have had the season ticket money and put that to the recovery package. They won't allow you to do that. It's all that sort of stuff. So when we went to Kidderminster, I went there with Keith Rowe on the team bus, I think, and others went, obviously. It was like, oh, my God, there's a football season now. Is this going to be the next problem? We're going to be rock bottom. Because we knew, I'd seen Simon Yeo score at Lincoln United in one of the friendlies, and I thought I'd nudged who I was with and said, he looks all right, doesn't he? Blimey, no. But it was Lincoln United, no disrespect. And that Kidderminster game, I think that's one of the highs I've ever had at Lincoln City, because we didn't get beat. And we looked like we could avoid relegation here. The spirit in the club, it was fantastic. And we were talking to the Lincoln fans after the game. Honestly, I felt like we'd won a cup final that day because we hadn't got beat. I thought if that's 3-0 and we get off to a bad start, and these are part-time footballers playing against full-time teams with bigger squads a lot of the time. That to me was one of the biggest buzzes I've ever had. A simple 1-1 draw at Kidderminster, because it just we looked all right. We looked pretty good, to be honest. So yeah, I keep forgetting what the question was with these long answers. Don't matter. Yeah, sorry, it's the age.
The questions don't matter.
The ravages of Lincoln City. That's what it's. That's fine.
So it was a pretty good start to the season. Obviously, it was a draw at Kidderminster. I think it was a win at home against the Macclesfield or Rochdale. That was 2-0. I think Dean Cropper scored.
Yeah.
Then it brings us to Carlile at home, which was quite an infamous game. And I just wonder what you remember from that, because we lost 1-0, but there was, I think, 3 red cards, a brawl in the box, players in the box, and all sorts. I mean, from your point of view, what do you remember?
Well, I can remember, because it carried on after that game. The then chairman got into trouble because he was like bringing up players who'd been dismissed into the director's box. Richie Hanlon was one, I think.
Not Richie Hanlon.
What's his name?
I know. I can't think of his name.
Again, ravages of time, but decent player actually. He's always done well against us. But they were coming in their kit, sitting in the director's box in the spare Carlisle seats, and they were spitting on the concrete steps, and he was generally like not behaving. And one of the stewards came and said, they can't come in the director's box, and you've got to start behaving. I think he'd like celebrated being chair. I think it was his first game, I think. And he'd been celebrating a bit in our boardroom, shall we say. And I got to know him afterwards, and he was all right. He was a really nice guy. He just got carried away. That's what football does to you. And they won, I think, didn't they? They won, yeah. So it was awful, really. But then word spread that I'd got him into trouble. Word spread around Carlisle that the Lincoln chairman called the police. I never did any such thing. I was just watching it, hoping he'd bloody behave himself, basically. So when we went to Carlisle, we then drew Carlisle in the FA Cup, I think. First round, who do we get? Away to Carlisle. And this is when sitting in the front of the director's box, my name was Mud. They were jumping up because it was quite high up, and they were spitting at us. And they had to get stewards round, and they asked Johnson, I can't remember his name, terrible memory now.
John Courtney,
that's right. I leaned across to him, you haven't got an umbrella, have you? like that. And he was laughing, and we were like, "Oh, I don't bear a grudge to anything like that." But it was a bit horrible because these Carlisle fans were giving me some intense grief, and I hadn't done anything. It was ridiculous. But yeah, that was a bizarre game, that was. And the worst thing was we lost. You know, if you win, you can stand any of this shenanigans. But no, it was bad behaviour. What's going on? And we lost to 9 men, I think. So yeah, not great great at all.
Now, I want to talk. You said a minute ago about we were bringing footballers in, probably not going to be able to play a certain style of football. But actually, we had 1 or 2 players.
Oh yeah,
that were absolute ballers. And there's one. Yeah. And I could have made it sound like I'd read your book before you came, but there's one that you mentioned in your book that I'd mentioned in my notes. We've done it separately.
Yeah.
He deserves a place in Lincoln City folklore, and people may not know his name.
Yeah.
Scott Willis.
Yeah.
What recollections of Scott Willis?
Well, you're a top bloke, Gary, and you're elevated even higher now because you brought up Scott Willis. and in the book, between each chapter, I've picked out certain people. Mandy Slater, who's done a great job for the Trust, John Reams, Clive Nates, a keyboard warrior person, because I've mentioned keyboard warriors, so I actually interviewed one and put him in the book. But I picked out Scott Willis of that period because he sort of summed up the time when at least on the pitch. And he was, I just loved the guy. I loved him. He was a character. He was on next to nothing. And whatever wages he got, he spent it before he got it because he used to go out into town. We stopped the team coach once because he'd forgotten his boots. But he was a good player. But his highlight of his career was his period at Lincoln, I think. He scored some good goals. He scored a screamer at Carlisle, of all places. Fantastic. From about 30 yards. But he was combative, shall we say. Kung fu kick somewhere, Cambridge was it, and got sent off. But he's off the pitch. He grasped life, but he took that opportunity. I think he then drifted off and went back into non-league. But I just loved him for what he did for our. He summed up that playing squad, perhaps a little bit too much in some ways. But and Keith used to look after him. He put an arm around him. He was reckless. His lifestyle. His mum and dad used to come and watch, and they'd be in the exec club, and they, again, like Mr. Courtney, they enjoyed the hospitality right up till 3 o'clock, and they were lovely as well. Broad Liverpudlians, and of course, as everybody calls him, he was Cilla Black's nephew. But as a player, I loved him, and I tried to contact him to ask him a few questions about the book, but I couldn't get hold of him, and I'd love to speak to him again. But yeah, you picked him out, and I did as well. So he obviously registered with both of us.
Well, I tried to look him up for a podcast because I would love to have got him on a podcast, because I think the next season he got in trouble at Stockport for somebody had spat at him, or he had supposedly spat at. So he was a maverick, and I just think there's a story there to be told. A little bit like, I'm going back some now, Andy Gorton, who was another kind of that maverick that sweeps through the club. Yeah. And when we're talking about mavericks, the next person I just want to touch upon wasn't a maverick as in terms of personality. On the field, I still say he's in the top 3 footballers I've ever seen play for Lincoln. Peter Game, he was a wizard, wasn't he? In that side. Well,
when I up to now, I've probably been a bit harsh on the style of football because I think the style was to get the ball in the opposition third, and then you had to play football. You're never going to score with a long ball. All you're doing is you're getting it into the attacking third as quickly as possible, and then we'd have some great footballers like Gary Taylor-Fletcher and people like that who would create the chances or create their own chances and score goals. And there was none better than Peter Game, who I think was a winger to begin with, and then was developed into a more sort of left or right-sided attacking player. So he dropped back and helped the full-back. But when he got the ball and ran at people, there was none better. He was such a gifted player. And he was just a joy to watch. He was one of the best players in that division, I think. Him and Richard Butcher, people like that. This was the recruitment. It was they were given a chance. He was given like another chance because I think he was already there. I can't remember. Yeah. But he was like given a new lease of life. That's another way of bringing a player on, giving them a new lease of life, not just their first opportunity. And he relished it, and he fitted in with the psychology of the squad as well. He liked a bit of fun. They all used to mix together. And a lot of it is just not how good they are as footballers, how it blends, how they use that in amongst the squad. That was one of the things, the synergy of the squad around that time was fantastic. You know, they made themselves into a really good team. Their character, what they did, and yeah, you're right. Peter Gain, fantastic footballer, fantastic.
So I do remember when Peter Gain came in, he was left out of the side in favour of Adam Buckley by Alan. And apparently Alan used to say to Peter, look at how Adam does it and do it that way, which probably isn't the best of advice.
Staggering.
Staggering. What's also staggering, you talk about the synergy there in the team, and I'm going to go off piece. Now you're here, I could talk all day long.
Yeah.
But that's amazing given the number of kind of short-term loans and players that came in. I mean, I off the top of my head, Danny Webb, Shane Bradley, Darren Dykes, who actually prompted all of my writing because I did a Where Are They Now article on Darren Dykes, who was the first person I ever interviewed.
Yeah.
I mean, how was that managed? I mean, you must have seen that firsthand with such a high turnover of temporary players, but also that key core. Yeah.
Well, I think I learned a lot. You know, I've always been a football fan, and I've never been involved in a football club, not like that. And however it happened, I was involved in a football club, and I was involved working with a guy who was just like a god, basically. What he knew about football was unbelievable. So he would recognise things like, it's okay, but why are we after that striker because he scored 15 goals last season for such and such? It's the first time he's ever got double figures. You know what I mean? So we'd look at somebody and think he must be good. And he says, no, I'd sooner have somebody who'd score 10 goals every season, because then he will get you 15 goals one season. And he'd say things like, some players can play 4 matches and then they can't play, they can't do anymore. This is because they're knackered. People don't realise the strength and the pace of league football then and now. You know, I was at the open training, you know, bringing it right to now. I was at the open training with my grandkids last Thursday. You cannot believe how good those players are, how quick their feet are, what they have to put in. And it was no different then, probably way more physical and not the sort of constraints on how players are taken out like they were in 2000 compared to what they are 20 years ago. They're a bit more protected now. So Keith used to recognise, I can get 10 games out of him and then I need to give him a rest. And he would that player would come along on a loan and think, I'm going to get 4 or 5 games. I'm in the shop window. I'll do what I can. If I can then get a longer deal with Lincoln, great. But it's not going to do me any harm because I'm not going anywhere where I am at the moment. AD Mike and all these sort of people who he brought in. So, and he knew so many players as well, you know, that sort of thing. But Keith, just speaking to him, he'd say, well, you mentioned him a bit ago, Justin Walker, was it? Something like that. Yeah. I went with Keith to watch, I think it was Boston versus Wrexham in League Two. And I never really went to games with Keith and Gary. I thought, lovely guys, but you've got to keep your distance as well. You never know what's going to happen. But I did go to Boston once, and Justin Walker, I think, was playing for Wrexham, I think it was. And I said, I always rated him. He says, yeah, but he's hardly left the centre circle. He cannot get box to box. I want a bloke with his skill to get from one penalty area to another, a la Richard Butcher. That's the sort of player I want, who doesn't even give it a second thought, and he's got the lungs to do it. So he just knew football. He knew players. He knew players of a certain standard that could step up. Keith did. So that's why he got a lot of short. That's one of the reasons he got a lot of short-term loans. Either that, or he thought they were all right and they weren't.
Do you remember Steve Watts?
Yeah. Steve Watts he was the striker, wasn't he, from down south,
from
Orient? Yeah.
So I'm completely off tangent, but he won a competition in a Red Top newspaper to earn a contract at Leyton Orient.
Yeah.
And after Lincoln, he went on to be a poker professional and a manager of an X Factor winner.
Oh.
So the thing is that this whole season's got so many little interesting side stories, and that fascinated me.
Well, I think that's something to do with the spirit of the people he recruited, because they would like, yeah, well, all right, football's all right, but I want to get into that and I want to get into that. I mean, Gary was part-time. You talk about staff. Gary was his part-time assistant. We couldn't afford to pay him full-time. So his other job was selling sunbeds. This is when we bought one. I remember manhandling it up the stairs. I thought, what bloody hell have we bought this thing for? And of course, they're not good for you anyway. It took up half our spare bedroom. And I bought one off Gary. And that he had to do that as well as get Lincoln to the Millennium Stadium. You know, that's what the period was. And Gary was into he was into like developing computer games and stuff like that, as well as, you know what I mean? It's I don't know how they did it. I really don't know how they did it, because they created a winning team. as well as all this other stuff. I think it was because they were out every night at games, picking up players, looking at the opposition. They never stopped. Those two. They were amazing.
So let's fast forward it. We come all the way through to the early May game. We've just beaten Bournemouth somehow at their place against all the odds. We've given ourselves a chance on the final day against Torquay. From your point of view, just kind of talk us through a little bit about that game, the run up and the aftermath.
Well, I think it's what everybody felt as fans, really. Can we get a result? Can we get in the playoffs? And it didn't look like we were going to do when they got a penalty, which would have made it 2-0. The Panenka that Marriott thought, what's that? And just caught it like his kiddie and it kicked it to him or something. But anyway, it was like they deserved to be in the playoffs. Keith and the lads deserved to be in the playoffs. I hate to say it, and this is like not a fan thing, but when you're in that position, we've got a good crowd. If we get in the playoffs, the business side's going to benefit. You don't get that much because the league take a lot of the money, but it's going to be, our recovery is going to be, imagine if we win the playoffs from nowhere, we were rock solid favourites to go down. Imagine if, so you really wanted to be in the playoffs for that, for the business, for the city, for the supporters, not just for Keith and the lads. So when Yayo came on and I think he shinned that equaliser, to be honest, but he volleyed it and everybody said, what a great goal. I think he shinned it. Anyway, who cares? He could have gone off his backside. It wouldn't have mattered. And we got in the playoffs. So it was fantastic. It was like, for all the pain and the anguish of everybody, I used to leave the ground. I used to meet mates in town, to be honest, but eventually when I could get away, I always used to walk up Cross Street, over the railway bridge into town, and the feeling in my brain at that time, I've got a suit on, I'd undone my tie, and I was heading for bloody walkabout or somewhere, was like, I'm never going to sleep after this. I'm never going to sleep because I'm going to be thinking now. We didn't have time to think because then it was tickets and playoff arrangements and everything. With a skeleton staff, we were selling tickets to people. They were queuing outside. It was like crazy busy. But it was the sort of busy that you wanted. It wasn't busy saving the club. It was busy, let's get to Cardiff, So just a shame it wasn't Wembley because they were still faffing about building it. And that's this chair making a noise, folks, not me personally. It was really good.
No, I mean, I remember I was lucky because I was poached the Imp at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't have to queue for a ticket. But I remember for the Scunthorpe game, we were queuing halfway down Cross Street.
Yeah.
Now, we talk about the Torquay game all the time, but actually that win against Scunthorpe United, Brian Laws, the whole handshake, I mean, that was another, we had two momentous games in Lincoln City history within days of each other.
Yeah. They were the best sporting moments I've ever known. 5-3 in a playoff, and we scored 2 late goals. Yayo, both from an angle. And then, it was like I had to sit down and rest when Simon Yayo put that ball in the net late on at Clanford Park. Because if they'd have got 1 goal, they'd have got 2 or 3. And we were so under the cosh. And then he raced through against Jamie McComb, I think it was, who we later signed. And he popped it in through the keeper's legs. 2,000 Lincoln fans went mad. We went mad. I had to sit down because my chest was hurting. I was like so elated. And it was the best sporting moment I have ever known because after everything that had gone on, when we got to the Millennium Stadium, I couldn't eat. We were in the posh bit and I didn't want to be there. I saw the gates open and the red and white stream in and I was with Polly and I thought, I don't want to sit here listening to the chairman of the Football League. I can't eat this food. This is just too much. We went in the stairwell and watched people. I couldn't be doing with it. And it was like, after all the stress and strain, it was unbelievable. And I don't mean me. I mean everybody connected with the club. Yourself, you lived and dreamed it with your role at the club. The fans just as much, lived and breathed it. I should say. The down and the upward curve to get to the Millennium Stadium, which was, we know what happened there, but it was the recovery of the club really in that season. It was amazing. It's
strange, isn't it? Because there's these big moments and big games. We talk about Arsenal in the FA Cup in 2017, for instance, where actually the pinnacle of the journey isn't particularly what you remember. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
the team walking out of the Millennium Stadium, the roof was on, it was a horrible kind of sticky kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I remember being, as the players came out off after defeat, and I'd gone to pick the suit up, and I remember Stuart Bimpson coming in crying. I remember that kind of emotion as well.
Yeah.
But actually, in terms of a game, being at the Millennium Stadium was a great achievement, but it's also kind of an anticlimax. You almost want the story to finish with Yayo's goal at Scunthorpe.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think they had 5 chances and scored 5 goals, and we had like 10 chances and scored 2. So, for as far as the footballing world was thinking, we got hammered, basically. I think the club arrangements were first class, but the arrangements by the authorities was pathetic because lots of our fans didn't get in. I was sitting there, my middle son, Matthew, was still on the road somewhere, so it spoilt it. You know, I wanted my family to be there. All I could hear was Lincoln fans are still queuing in traffic. And I just thought, oh, Christ, this, we've got this amazing occasion. Whether it's 5-2 or not, they should be here. And they were coming in after 20 minutes when we were 2-0 down or whatever. I remember seeing Matthew because I knew where his seat was. And he went, like that, why have I bothered when I've come here and the results going against us? And I just thought I'd spoilt it, really. And then afterwards, it was like, shall we have an open top bus? And I said, well, of course not. We've just got bloody hammered 5-2. Let's move on till next season. But then somebody said, yeah, but it's not the match. It's not promotion. It's from nearly going under to appearing in front of 15,000 people and the prospects look good. Let's recognise that achievement and for the supporters, for all of us. So, yeah, we do the open top bus thing on the Bank Holiday Monday, I think it was. I remember driving away from the Millennium Stadium the next morning. Sheffield Wednesday fans, I think it were queuing and queuing and queuing. And I said, they're never going to get there in time either. Well, how does this work? So you're quite right. It wasn't the match or the arrangements. Yeah, not great by other people. It was the whole season and where we were and where we ended up, sort of thing, in a much better situation. And the heroic achievements of Keith, Gary, the players, lovely bunch of players, most of all our fans, because our fans are the best fans in the country, and they showed it around that time.
Fantastic. Look, we've got about 45 minutes in. I've still got 2 seasons I want to talk about. No, not an apology. So before we move on to a few other bits, I just want to invite you back on the podcast to chat about the next 2 seasons at some point. Happy to do that.
Happy to do that.
Anybody that wants to do a little bit of pre-reading, is there or thereabouts still available?
It is on Kindle.
Yeah,
that's the Keith Alexander book. Yeah. I think you can get hardbacks secondhand on Amazon or eBay or whatever. It's sold out all the hardbacks, but you can still get it on Kindle because Kindle's unlimited sort of thing. So yeah, it is available then. Yeah.
For a bit of pre-reading, if you're a younger fan, 20 years old, and you've got a little bit enthused by this, that's one great book. And there was also, I can't remember the author's name, but One Hell of a Season.
Yeah, that was Graham Lloyd.
Graham Lloyd is another good read. So they're 2 books that you can. I'll look at the camera for a minute. They're 2 books that you can read about this season that we've just been discussing, which go into a huge amount of depth. But we're going to move on now because I've actually invited you on to talk to you about your current book.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a copy here for everybody. Imposter, available.
It's available Amazon, Linden Books on the Vale, Waterstones in town, and now the matches are starting. You can get one from us at the Trust Pod in the Fan Village.
Now, I must confess, a terrible host. I haven't read it as yet. Rob brought me my copy today. I'm going to get stuck into that. But it's about the 23-24 season. That's the backdrop, but it's really about contrasting your time as chairman to current football and a little bit of something for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a diary of that season because that was my last season on the board as the trust rep for that 4-year period. And obviously, the second half of that season was pretty good. Joe Taylor and we nearly got in the playoffs. The second half of that season was quite a turnaround. So that's like the framework of the book, but it's the contrast of Lincoln City 20 years ago, which I've been describing, really struggling, and the Lincoln City of now, really, which is completely different animal. You know what I mean? With Clive, Liam, the managers we've had, the way the club is set up, but it's all, the whole theme throughout the book as well is about supporters involved in their football club. So those are the main themes, really. And the diary bit is just to frame it. There's also, because it was quite a season for Lincoln United, so there's bits about that, and there's bits about Lincolnshire cricket, which I was involved in for 10 years, but not a huge amount of that. It's mostly the Lincoln City of then compared to the, because as a fans rep, I've had experience 5 years and 4 years, completely different football club, basically. And so that's why I wrote it, and that's why it's that season, because I'm coming to an end of that period on the board. So I really enjoyed doing it. There's some, I reveal quite a lot. There's one bloke who gets criticised quite a lot, and that's me. But there's stupid things I did and crazy things I did. It took its toll personally in some ways. I haven't really gone into that in a lot of depth, but it was, and that's not like, look at me, the poor victim. It's because I needed to keep my brain in gear, and sometimes I didn't. But it's just the story of an ordinary fan involved in his football club, basically, hence the title, Imposter.
I did read some reviews saying that you were quite self-deprecating in there, and a lot of the humour is pointed at yourself rather than out.
Well, because to be honest, I never asked the club. I didn't say to Clive, and I did meet Clive because there's a bit about Clive, and I ran it by him, and he read the introduction, but I didn't officially ask the club, do you mind? Because I'm like talking about what was decided in the boardroom in the second 4 years, and I just went ahead and did it. I thought, bugger it, I'll just write it. It was like, I like writing anyway. I have a column in the paper, and I just like doing it, and it sort of grew, and I thought, well, yeah, we'll try and get it published. But yeah, I'd have a go at myself, but I think anybody, that should be your starting point before you start having a go at anybody else,
Yeah, always shine a light on yourself before other people.
Yeah, spot on.
You talk about the differences. So I put some questions, or I put out that you were coming on to some of our Patreons, and one of the overriding things that people wanted to ask about was social media, and how it may have affected your stint as chairman back in the early 2000s, and kind of would things, do you think, have been different for you then, and how is it now compared to back then?
Well, it's a sort of hypothetical thing. Obviously, what would it have been like in 2000 to 2005? And I think it would have made life as a chairman unbearable, to be honest, because you've got to use it. As a fans rep, I have to put stuff out, so I'm a bit basic. I'm sort of Twitter and Facebook myself, and the trust have other platforms, use other platforms as well. But so I'd have to go on it, and I don't think I could have managed it with the sort of thing that's put out now. If it was put out then when the club was really, I mean, the stuff that gets put out now, and we're halfway in League One, we're top half of League One, and we were like struggling to survive. And imagine what some people, small minority, would be saying. I don't think I could have survived that. And I do touch on it in the book. I interviewed someone and he agreed to be interviewed about who's put some comments on, quite mild, and he's a top bloke, to be honest. The guy Tilly, I'm not going to, I'll name him. He's a lovely bloke. He has had a go at odd times, and I don't really class him as a keyboard warrior that much. I did want to introduce somebody like that, though, to sort of say, why does this happen? And a lot of it is the 10 to 3 thing, or the Saturday night thing where a bit angry, withdrawn, letting a late goal. We all get angry. We don't get angry. I don't get angry, but I get disappointed. And you think, why did that happen? But, but some of it is like so ridiculous. And so I just don't know. There's a small minority at Lincoln, and I don't know why they do it. I honestly don't know why they do it. It's almost, I don't know how to class it. It's a phenomenon that has come along with social media. It's like some satisfaction in having a dig at everybody, and I just don't get it. I just don't get it myself.
Do you think that perhaps a lot of those people would have been voicing that around in their pubs back in the 2000s and in the 80s, and it would have kind of bounced off that, and that's as far as it goes? Whereas people don't go out now, so they sit at home with a drink and try to get that on social media.
And I think sometimes they don't even realise how many people can listen to it. Either that, or I just don't know why they do it. If they're angry, or they, if you genuinely got a point, then fine. But what good is it going to do? You know what I mean? To say some of the comments that they say, because it's not constructive. You know what I mean? It's not constructive. It's damaging. Imagine if Lincoln lose the first 6 games, because it could happen. there's 40 to go to get to 50 points or 60 points, because that's the other. I can never understand. It's where you are after 46 games. The judgment of a football club is where you are. Where did you end up at the end of the season? Did you have a cup run? And what's the finances like? I don't give a shit about the. Sorry, I don't give a damn about the rest of it. And if we've lost 3 games on the trot, it's what you do about it. You don't have a big post-mortem and make it worse. Again, I've forgotten what the question was, but to me, it's like, please just count to 10 and don't put the stuff out. And also, don't put stuff out when you don't know the facts. You know, there's a couple of people at the football club, when we're losing, get extreme criticism. And I know, because I've been on the board, it's wrong what they're saying about them. I categorically tell you it's wrong about these guys, because they're good guys doing a difficult job under difficult circumstances. But there's always a bogeyman or two at the football club when you've lost a couple of games. Don't do it. It's not right. You affect, you know, we get people who are abused when they're out with their kids. You know, that has happened at Lincoln City. And we're not bottom of the National League. You know, look where we've come from. You know, count your blessings as well. And then as soon as you put that on social media, it's, oh, you're not ambitious. Of course we're ambitious. It's getting me to rant now, so
you come on the right podcast, the Rose Tinted Spectacle podcast.
Yeah, I'm definitely rose tinted.
Let's shuffle on a little bit, because obviously you're fine. You're back as a kind of a key figure with the Red Imps Community Trust. You chair the Red Imps Community Trust, probably a body that between your first spell and your second spell took quite a reputation hit at a certain time. But it does feel now, from your work and the work of the board and the people around you, that the Red Imps Community Trust is kind of gaining a little bit of standing again within the families.
It's had a bad time. It was not operating properly. There was bad things happening. That's not the biggest period in the trust's history. It's existed for 25 years, but it did exist, and that needed to recover. The other conscious thing that we've done over the last few years is, let's not just say the club's doing well, so we don't need to do anything. Let's try and match the club in being a dynamic fans organisation. Let's lift our profile to match what the club are doing. To be honest, that's a bit of a daft thing to say, because we're never going to match how much the club's progressed. But let's progress as a fans organisation to try and assimilate with the professional side of the football club. And let's do more. Let's achieve more. Let's work out what we want to do and do it, and then like measure what we do. Is it working? And keep going. So, you know, the strap line, supporting our fans, our club, our community. That's our reason for being. That's what we do. Everything we do on that. We've got great people who lead in each of those areas, and it's a good supporters trust. It's a good supporters trust. That, you know, sometimes it's even harder when things are going well to be a good supporters trust. And you look at Scunthorpe and Morecambe and all of these now, their trusts suddenly get a boost of membership and really kick into gear because the club's a basket case. But and that's really sometimes why you need a good, strong supporters trust at a football club, because that's often where it all comes back to. But yeah, there's lovely people involved in the trust. I'm not going to name them because there's so many of them, and they're doing a good job, I think. And we're out there in the fan village and doing stuff. The focus this next season is on younger supporters, because younger supporters still don't have too much of a voice. So that's one of the aims we're looking at as over the new season.
Fantastic. One of my highlights is on a match day, I do occasionally like to come and flick through all the old programs.
Yeah.
And I've got nearly all of them, but it's just great to have a flick through. It does.
We've got quite an archive now, to be honest,
I think that's good. And also you're involved in an exhibition at Cathedral that fans can see. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, just quickly, the Cathedral Asters would the Trust put on an exhibition in the Chapter House. It's a fantastic sort of round structure. If people have been in it, it lends itself to walking around. And so we've sourced lots and lots of Lincoln City stuff. It's a bit of a fluid thing. There'll be stuff there now that will replace over the 4 weeks that it's going to be available for people to visit. It opened this last Monday officially. So if people want to go and have a look, there's some lovely Lincoln City stuff. And we've tried to put the emphasis on what the club is, which is inclusive of everybody. it's a fans. It's a big thing for the fans and the community. It's not just about players and directors and that sort of stuff. Albeit we recognise Harvey and his family, Clive, and there's some volunteer people we recognise and who've done lots for the football club. So it's got a nice feel about it, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. I should definitely pop up and have a look. And just to wrap up, the coming season, it's right upon us, isn't it? I mean, what are your kind of expectations? What can you see happening?
Yeah, it's difficult because it's going to be a difficult league. I think we're going to be halfway. I would say we've got a halfway squad, which is always with 3 points for a win. You're never that far off the playoffs. It's not going to be easy to be halfway, but I think looking at the squad and looking at the sort of home friendly, which sort of not restored faith, but we could get a good measure of what the squad was like. I think we're pretty strong. I think we're pretty big and physical. I think we need to be creative. We need to supply people like Collins and Street and people like that. But I think we're going to do okay.
Good, excellent. I hope so. I've got us down as 12th.
Not bad.
May or may not improve by the end of the transfer window. I think you just got to get a little bit of luck, haven't you? If we stay injury free, because even though we've got a squad of 26, it's probably a first team playing squad of 19 or 20 maybe. So, but once again, as you said, we're a League One side. It's not a summer where we've just battled administration, and I'm sure Michael and Clive and Liam aren't looking at Saturday thinking, "Oh God, we've got a game to go to," and that's a nice position to be in.
Yeah, but they've got and we've got quite a few from last year, which. Hence, not so many signings, but nice to have a settled squad, and people like Hamilton and all that can now push forward and show us what they really are. Because people like him are good quality players, I think. And he started to show it again at the end of last season.
Well, he's obviously injured, wasn't he?
He was,
last season.
So and in and out the team and stuff. But I rate him as much as any of the ones who are, more highly thought of. To be honest, I think he's a quality player.
Yes. Right, I could sit here and chat about Lincoln City to Rob Bradley all day and all night, and we will do it again. We'll be talking about the 03-04 and 04-05 season at some point in the future. So, Rob, thank you so much for coming all the way out to the Lincolnshire Wolds. Remember, you can pick Rob's book up. That's on Amazon, eBay.
Yeah,
you can get it in the
local bookshops and at the ground on match day.
So pop along, see Rob and the Red Imps Community Trust team on the podcast. Thank you for listening or watching. We'll be back again soon. Up the Imps.